Welcome to the History of L.A. one-on-one sessions, Junor Francis. Now, this series celebrates Southern California's ska, rocksteady, and vintage reggae scene through insightful conversations with legends and modern-day players, including those behind the scenes, and they are very important. This is the 20th one-on-one sessions and our 5th in this exciting new podcast YouTube channel. Thanks to the regular supporters, thanks to first-timers, and welcome to just about everyone who is viewing and listening. Today's guest is veteran singer, guitarist, frontman of the Toasters and record label guru, Rob, known affectionately as Bucket. His parents christened him Rob Hingley. How are you, Rob?
Hello, Junior. Welcome, good vibes from Texas to the West Coast, man.
Yes, indeed.
How you doing?
Welcome and congratulations, man. As the Toasters, you'll be celebrating your 40th anniversary this year. If I'm not mistaken, you have 10 studio albums, plus numerous live albums and compilations under your belt. Such a huge accomplishment. Wow.
Yeah, well, it's been a lot of work, but we've been thrown off the track this last year by COVID. So the celebration we're supposed to have in 2020 is going to happen now in 2021 and 2022. So we've been thrown off the track by a virus.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is this the longest you've gone out without touring since the band came together and you started touring?
Almost. There was
It's 14 months, approximately 14 months since you've been locked.
Yeah, it's the second longest time that, and it's a bad memory, was I had to come off the road when we were closing up Moon Records in 2000. So I had to deal with the receivership and deal with all those lawyers and all that stuff. So that took me off the road for a while, and that was painful. But this one seems to hurt a little bit more because it's we get so many communications from the fans who are like hurting for some good music to come back around. So I'm hoping now finally that if our governments and politicians can get their shit together, we can get back out on the road in a meaningful way. So it's been difficult, Jenny. Yeah.
I know. So tell us about some of the adjustments that you had to make off the road over the past 14 months.
Well, I had to adjust to being at home, and I don't like that. And my wife certainly, after a while, my wife certainly didn't like it. She says to me, when are you going to go back out on the road? And so, well, and I say, well, as a matter of fact, to be honest, I can't say. So I've been good. I painted the fence. I put in the vegetable garden. I did everything up nice around the house. I've been working hard, but I'm looking forward to coming back and playing some shows. Yep. And in fact, the next big tour we have is heading out your way to California. We flipped the script a little bit, and normally we come out your way in January, February time, but now we're coming November, December. So that's going to be a little Thanksgiving present, not only for me, but also for you.
Yes, so you have, you've been booked in numerous venues around Southern California?
Yep, that's it. I think the tour dates are just announced now. So
are you at liberty to tell us where you'll be playing?
Well, pretty much everywhere from San Diego all the way up to Portland and back.
Yeah. Nice. But before we move on, you're now living in Texas, right?
Yeah, it's don't ask me how it happened, but here I am all of a sudden. I had been living in Spain for 11 years, but we had a little bit of an issue. One of the younger kids with the development, and so we had to come back to America to get her back into school, and somehow the dart landed in the dartboard of San Antonio, Texas. And as it happens, it was not a bad cast. It's a pretty good place here. It's a lot of people think, well, Texas, what's up with that? But here it's a very multicultural city. Of course, a huge Mexican influence, but a lot of also ethnic groups here. So I'm having a great time in San Antonio, reinventing some NYC ska to some Texas ska.
Because when I think of Texas, I think of a place I fly over if I'm going to Jamaica.
Yeah, well, throw me out a beef patty when you come over, please. You know?
All right, sir.
Yeah. So when you reach San Antonio, toss the beef patty. I'll be looking to catch it.
There you go, sir. So you mentioned beef patty. So where were you born and raised?
Well, I was born in England, in Weymouth,
I mean,
Dorset,
I know, but I'm asking for the benefit of our listeners.
in 1955.
Uh-huh.
Which
Where
is like,
you didn't say? Did you say exactly where?
in Weymouth, Dorset, in
All
England.
right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Right. And I think your father was in the British Army. So
Yeah, he
by
was.
default, you traveled extensively around the world, right? But if
Well, I
not
mean,
around the world, multiple places.
yeah, I mean, by the time I was 10 years old, I was born in England, but I'd lived in Germany 2 times. I lived in France, I'd lived in Cyprus, and more importantly, I'd ended up in Nairobi, East Africa, where I lived until 1964,
Mhm.
which is when they achieved their independence, which they call
Right.
uhuru, which is the Swahili word for uhuru. And then we had to come home in a hurry because the African guys, they weren't too happy about the British troops. But being all around the world, and especially there at that time, I speak Swahili, number one, but I was able to listen to some great local bands there, a lot of the African so-called jazz bands playing like pretty much, Afro mix jazz music in 1962, interesting
Mhm.
stuff. So of course, when I got back to England in 1964, first thing I hear on the radio, apart from Rolling Stones, Beatles, all this stuff, I hear this artist they call Millie Small.
What was I thinking? That was what
Yeah.
I was
And
thinking.
I'm like, what the heck
64.
is this? My Boy Lollipop. They said, well,
Yes.
I've got to. So I went right out and bought that record. It was just on vinyl, like a 7-inch vinyl, thick as a dinner plate, and I still have it. And so that's how I got in the ska right there, coming out of those African vibes I was brought up in, back
Mhm.
into England. Rolling Stones, yeah. Beatles, yeah. Millie Smalls, let's buy that.
Mhm.
And so that's where I discovered ska music right there. I was 9 years old at that time.
So fortunately for you, having lived around the world, you were exposed to multiple genres of music at a very young age.
Yep.
Mhm. Nice.
Like way more than I would have been
Yes, sir. Yes.
in.
Mhm.
I mean, England was maybe a little bit more ahead, but I mean, England at that time was
I would say
a
way
very
ahead though,
very close up
musically.
place. But I mean, people like Chris Blackwell and Laurel Aitken had brought ska music to England as early as 1962.
Mhm.
And as much as people want to slag off Chris Blackwell, without him, ska music would not have continued because it kind of tailed off in Jamaica. But by Chris Blackwell introducing his artists into England and having huge hits for them
Mhm.
in the early 60s in the UK, that's where we all got into ska in
Mhm.
England, listening to
Right.
those artists.
Mhm.
And then tailing into Laurel Aitken, of course, he was the trendsetter. But then, the Upsetters and all those great artists who segued into the Trojan music explosion in the late 60s. It was a seminal time for reggae in England,
Mhm.
62 to 67.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Indeed.
The Trojan explosion is what we called it. You've
Yes.
probably heard of that now.
Yes, and I'm aware of it, having been to London a few times, and perhaps I have a massive collection of Trojan records by default because that's where all the songs are. They made them in Jamaica and just send them off to England on the Trojan label. There you go. So if I want them, I have to buy them, whether I like Trojan or not. Yeah. So when did you start singing and playing the guitar, Rob?
Well, not till a lot later. I mean, I have to confess that when I came back to England, my aunt bought me a little plastic Beatles guitar with 4 strings on it. So my first experience of playing the guitar was on this little plastic Beatles guitar in 1965. And that didn't go serious. And I didn't really start singing and playing guitar until I was 16 years old in high school doing my final exams, which would have been like 1970, I guess. So it was kind of late. So the guitar playing came late, but the listening came early. And of course, at that time, I was in the pocket ska and reggae music happening around there. One of the biggest releases for me, a big ear opener, was the soundtrack for Harder They Come.
Yes, sir. We took reggae around the world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people ask me, well, you know, if you're going to be talking to somebody and recommend one record that would be instrumental in somebody understanding what the genre is, mm-hmm. I would take a step back from two-tone. I would take a step back from everything, and I'd say, listen to that. The soundtrack for The Harder They Come, mm-hmm. which is where artists like Jimmy Cliff, great Jimmy Cliff, was catapulted into fame with that. But that soundtrack on it is everybody you need to know from the springboard of reggae music into what is modern ska. And mm-hmm. the biggest name, of course, on that roster, on that list, would be Toots and the Maytals. Mm-hmm. And the one song, if I had to define all of it, what is the root? I would say Funky Kingston. I would select that track.
Is it on that soundtrack? I can't remember. I don't think it's on that particular soundtrack.
I'm not sure if that particular song is, but two from that record is.
Guess and said no. There was a later recording. That was a later recording. Mm-hmm.
But I would say that there's the pocket right there.
Yes, sir. I definitely second that. So New York now. So from England to New York, when did you relocate?
Well, I went to New York in 1980.
What was the occasion? Visit or live?
And I was at that time I had been working in London for a science fiction and comic book store called Forbidden Planet. Mm-hmm. And they were big in England at that time. They'd opened a shop in New York, and they'd said, "Can you go over there and help them out, because the people there need a little bit of guidance in what they're doing," which really meant they wanted me to go there, fire them all, and hire new people. So I tried to make that as easy on people as we could, but you know how that works. And so here I am. I find myself in New York City in 1980, which was a fantastic place, like having live electricity like pumped onto your body. It's like, wow, what a great place this is. Everything going on. And I was living on the Lower East Side at that time, which was like punk rock city. So that was like, you know, very cutting edge societal evolution there. And so I get there in 1980, and I'm like, you know, first the boss says, "Well, you're going to be here for 3 months." So okay. And then he says, "Oh, you're going to be here for 6 months." I was like, man, well, I need to find something to do. What am I going to do? Like, let me get together a jam band with some of the guys here working at the place who are all musicians into this. Let's get a jam band together so we have something to do in the evening. So when I go home, we can, you know, jam some music, drink some beers, do what we're doing. And they say, "Well, what music are we going to play?" I said, "Well, we're going to play ska music." And they were like, "Well, what is that?" I said, "Dude, you know, here we are, New York City, 1980. And they're like, "What is ska music?" I said, "What?" Having just come from England, where two-tone with 1979 with Gangsters had been the #1 hit. So two-tone music at that time in England was at the top. And I'm saying to these guys, have you heard of these bands like The Specials and Madness and Selector, the best two-tone band, Selector, or the Beat? And they're like, "No." I'm like, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start this band. I'm going to teach you guys how to play ska music. And it's not it's not 1 and 3, it's 2 and 4. You know, so you got to change it. You got to change your beat round. And so trying to get these guys to play, that was a little difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And then we go to see, I take these guys, at that point, the band was not called the Toasters. It was called Not Bob Marley at this point. And so I said, "Come on, we're going to, the beat, or in America, we say the English beat because there's whatever." So we go to the Roseland Ballroom, and we watch this band, and they're all blown away. And we meet up with Dave Wakeling after the show, and I say, "What a big fan." He's, you know, "You're welcome." And so that's when we decided to start the Toasters and have a full-on ska music band. So it
Mhm.
was like that music, like that moment in the Blues Brothers, where they go to see the penguin and light shines down, and he says, "Oh yeah, this is what we're going to do." It was
Mhm.
that. It was that moment.
But Bucket,
Yeah.
I was living in New York at that time, and there was no ska on the radio. I remember one DJ, Jeff Barnes, would infrequently on Saturday mornings mixing some oldies. But so I don't necessarily fault anyone in New York at that time for not knowing much about ska or two-tone. And then I remember when Nelson Mandela, who made the song? There's Free Nelson Mandela. Free
See,
Nelson.
it was Special AKA.
Yeah, right. So that's when I really, heard two-tone in its true sense and decided to pay more attention to the music. But in New York, there was much ska and rocksteady.
Free Nelson Mandela.
Yes, sir, that's the one. There you go, man.
What a great hit. Yeah, it was
yes, sir.
It was a Special AKA with Rhoda Dakar singing from the Body Snatchers.
Mm-hmm.
What a fantastic lady. What a fantastic lady she is. And so I think I was in that same position on the Lower East Side in 1980, where all around I looked was these prominent punk rock musicians everywhere. Mm-hmm. And where I lived on 8th Street and Avenue A, or 8th Street and Avenue B, which was at that time in the ghetto in the hood, people say, why do you want to go live over there? I say, dude, I just been living in Brixton. This is no fright to me. Nothing these guys have is any worse than those yardies down there that live next door to me. And so I went there, and on the bar stools next to me, and this classic bar called the Park Inn Tavern, which is like this little watering hole, and it was full of New York City hardcore guys there, from bands like the Cro-Mags and Murphy's Law there. But at the same time, I would go have a beer with Wayne Kramer from the MC5, who was there, and the guys from Ivan Julian and Richard Hell and the Voidoids, all these like punk rock guys. So it was a hot spot for music cooking.
Oh yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
And most of it, a lot of it coming out was this like, NYC's punk glam scene, but at the same time, all the hardcore guys, the Cro-Mags, and we were rehearsing in a studio at 171 Avenue A, just up the road from there, and we were there, and at the same time was the Bad Brains rehearsing there, the Cro-Mags rehearsing there, and the Toasters and Murphy's Law. So there's a whole big mix of stuff going on. And out of that, we springboarded ska music with our first gig at the 7A Club in 1982. Was our first gig, and very shortly after, we were able to get a showcase at CBGB, where Hilly Crystal liked us so much, he said, "Well, I'm going to put you on the weekend," and that went so well that he said, "I'm going to give you a residency, so you can have one night a month to book yourself." And so we turned that into the Ska Night. And so by 84, we were able to, have a whole New York City ska scene going on.
Right. Congratulations, man. Congratulations. Yeah. And I wanted to, for the benefit of the original members, who were they, sir? The Toasters.
Well, the original members in 1982, one of them was my roommate, who, when I first moved in to New York City, my roommate played piano, said, "Okay, you're going to be in the band." So he got co-opted. You ever see that movie, The Commitments?
No, I mostly watch reggae movie. I'm sorry.
You have to watch this movie called The Commitments, an Alan Parker movie about guys in Belfast who join a band, and they take anybody who can play and put them together into units. So you got to watch that. But it was some guys from Forbidden Planet, Gary Aitken, who was playing the congas, and then a couple of guys in the bar, Teddy McSpade on guitar, and Vicky Rose on bass, who was a bartender. And so we started this band from nothing. People didn't know nothing about ska music, and turned it into this successful ska machine over the course of a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to teach these guys everything. Yeah, they didn't know anybody.
So essentially, you would say there was relatively no ska scene in the United States at that time, like early 80s.
No, nothing. Zero.
Nothing. Yes. Yeah. Wow. So that vision came from you being around the world, and more specifically England, where the ska scene was vibrant, where ska two-tone.
Well, the same as Laurel Aitken with the air ticket from Cliff Blackwell took ska music to England in his back pocket in 1962.
But he had no other choice. He had no. What was he going to play?
Well, yeah, but in England at that time there was a huge Jamaican population,
right?
Because after the war, after World War I and World War II, the English Queen had killed so many of her own people, they didn't have enough people to work. So they said, let's bring some Jamaican guys in.
Windrush. They call them the Windrush, I think.
Yeah, the Windrush. Yeah. And look what happened there. It was big disrespect. That. But they brought everybody in to work. And on the back of that, along with the Jamaican workers and their families, came the culture, came the food, came the music. And so that's how the ska music arrived into England.
Right.
It's because originally there was the audience of Jamaican people who wanted to see these core Jamaican artists like Laurel Aitken,
right,
or Millie Smalls,
Owen Gray,
come in to sing for them in the UK. But because the audience was there built in with the Jamaican and West Indian Trinidadian workers who'd been brought there in the 50s, so that formed the basis for these artists to be able to come first to entertain them, and then interface with a wider English white audience, and that's how the ska infiltrated into the UK.
Yes, sir. And I should also mention Rico. He came in 1960-61, so he was part of that early Windrush generation. Yeah, Rico, that great Rico. I wanted to ask you about producer and singer Joe Jackson, your relationship with him, and what role he played in your growth and development.
Well, first of all, I was a big fan of his. I thought his Look Sharp album in the 70s was maybe one of the best albums of that particular era, alongside Elvis Costello. My Aim Is True, that record. And who was the other great artist from that time? I would have said Ian Dury and the Blockheads, these bands. So these were like different aspects of English cultural pop. But Joe Jackson had something, and I was lucky enough to meet up with him a couple of times. And here's the interesting cross section. As I was working in Forbidden Planet to be able to come to work in London and work in the USA, I had met Joe Jackson in London, and I was the guy who was in charge of finding him. He's a big comic book collector. So I was the guy at Forbidden Planet who was buying his old comic books for him. So I met him in London in 1979. And then I moved to USA in 1980, and so did he. So one day I'm working in Forbidden Planet in New York. In walks Joe Jackson.
Wow, what a coincidence.
He's saying, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
So, here's what it is. So he and I would just go out once a week and have a beer and talk shit on politicians or discuss politics, that's mostly negative. And then when the band got going, he was a big supporter. And he helped us produce some records, came, played some live shows with CBGB's, appeared on stage at CBGB's, and was a big promoter for the band. And he ended up producing the 1985 Recommendations EP, which is our breakout release, the same year as Fishbone put out Party at Ground Zero. So 1985 was the groundbreaking of ska music in the USA on East and West, I would say. Right. And from that point, I've been friends with him ever since, and he's produced quite a few more records for us.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I want to, yes, sir. I want to ask you about the formation or birth of Moon Records. But before, let me remind the listeners that I'm in conversation with veteran singer, guitarist, frontman of the Toasters, and record label guru Rob, known affectionately worldwide as Bucket, but his parents register him Rob Hingley. Rob is usually short for Robert, right? And is that the case in your case? Robert.
Well, my real name is Robert, but the only people who call me Robert is my grandmother, who's dead now, and my wife when she's mad at me. But everybody else calls me Bucket.
Yes, right. All right, good. So we stick with it. Again, Bucket, yeah, man. So let's start with Moon Records, how it came into existence. I know you were instrumental, as a matter of fact, the founder, but you could correct me if I'm wrong.
No, well, what happened there was as the Toasters were gathering some steam in 1982, 1983,
right,
we saw a need to, we had a demo of tunes, and I put that tape in my pocket, and I went around all the record labels in New York and knocked on the doors, and all the music publications, such as the Village Voice, which at that time was maybe the most influential music critic magazine in New York.
They were fairly progressive too, right?
Yeah, and very progressive. And the man named there was Robert Christgau, who was like maybe the #1 music critic in New York. And I played him our tape, and he said, "I'll never review a Toasters record." He said, "You guys are nothing but a bar band. Wow. And I'll never review your records." I say, "Okay, well, here we go."
That was a low blow.
Well, it's a low blow, but it's okay. Well, I'm sorry you don't like it, but let's move on. So now I take the tape and I go around all the labels in New York. At that point, every label was in New York at that point, not LA. It's before the music business moved there. And nobody would review the record. And one guy said to me, what did he say? He said, "I'll never review that record. It's circus music." He said, "You're never going to get anywhere playing that music. It's circus music." And now I think, well, does he still have his job? He probably doesn't. So anyway, so right from the get-go, it became obvious that, like, ska music, people treated it like a joke. They said, "What is this?" Like, nobody got it. Nobody understood it. Nobody got the whole socio-political sense of it, or the fact that it was like a transactional music that involved not just white people or black people. It's like for everybody. It was before reggae happened, so people didn't get it. It's like, and so I thought, wow, if anything's going to happen, we're going to have to do it ourselves.
Yes, sir.
And so that's what we did.
Nice.
We started small. We released a single. We played a lot of shows, got signed to a good booking agent, played 1,000 around the USA, and just built it up step by step ourselves. In spite of what the industry said. The industry said, "Oh, you're never going to make it." And look what happened.
I tell you, and what happened to those guys now? Hope they have jobs.
Yeah.
So you have described the New York ska scene. Let's talk a little bit about the concert documentary from 1990. You're familiar with that?
Which one is that?
I think it's called the New York Scarecrows concert.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was 1988.
88.
That came out. And what happened there, it was that on one level, it was a misfire because we'd hooked up with a guy, I'm trying to recall his name now, Joe, whatever it says. It's the guy who'd filmed the Scarecrows documentary. It was so successful with Two-Tone back in the day. I had to search for his name. But anyway, the guy who directed that was in New York, and I met him. And I said, "Well, what do you think about doing the same thing for what's happening now with the New York City ska scene, which back then was in full flow because we'd had the 1986 release of the New York Beat Hit and Run compilation, which was like the first nationally distributed ska record in the USA. And so we had it all planned to. We rented a place called the Cat Club, which is a big venue, and Joe Massett, that was his name was, and I hired a sound truck, a 48-track mixing truck to sit outside, so we could record the show to the recording truck outside and get a mix, and then he was going to come and video it. But as it happened, on the night he was a no-show, he flicked out. And so then I thought, well, I may as well put this record out. And that's what it was. But it was supposed to be the soundtrack to the New York City version of Scarecrows, 1988. And just ended up being a somewhat obscure live album, which was a great documentary piece of what was happening in New York City in 1988, but not quite as good as it could have been.
Right. Now, this Scarecrows tour, was that in 1993? And how did that come about?
Yeah, that was what a tour that was.
Go into details.
I looked at that as well. A lot of people want to pinpoint what was the time, what was the precise time that ska music blew up in the United States. And a lot of people want to look at some of these bands came after in the late 90s, like No Doubt or whomever, who I have no problem with, who are great bands in their own right. But I think when we did the Skavuvi tour in 1993, that was a collaboration between myself and a couple of booking agents I was working at, and a guy in New York City who had a club called Sounds of Brazil, SOBs. His name was Larry Gold. And he would bring in a lot of Latin American bands. That's where the Scatlites would play on a regular basis. And it was like a nice venue. A lot of the big reggae artists would play there. And he believed in the project. He said, you know what, I'm going to give you, he said, I don't know shit about ska music so much. I mean, I like when you play here. I like when the Scatlites play here. But I'm going to give you the money to bankroll whatever you need to do to make a big ska music tour happen in the United States. And so he was a financial backer. And so with his cash, we were able to put together a tour with 3 tour buses. And on those 3 tour buses was the Toasters, the Selector, the Scatolites, and the Special Beat. And by the Special Beat, I'm saying that was a supergroup of guys from the Specials and from the Beat and a couple of other guys. And so that would have been Neville Staple, would have been Rankin Roger.
Big name.
It would have been Linval from the Specials, would have been Brad from the Specials, and Horace from the Specials, and 2 other guys, a guy called Finney from the Loafers in the UK, and a guy called Sean Flowerdew, who was also in the Loafers. So that was a composite band. So here's the 4-band tour that was sent out, around 50 dates in the US.
Wow. So
it's 50-day tour.
That was really historic, because I think it was the first time that all 3 waves came together with the Scatolites, Founding Fathers, Special Beat, and Selectors, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
First time.
Yeah, it's the first time
in the history of the United States.
And so in order to get people to understand the compatibility of that on one level, the contiguity of that, and the spatiotemporal effect of that on one level, to have this package of bands that was like celebrating 50 years of music together on one stage. And a lot of people were skeptical, and it was big risk, but it was a huge hit. And it was one of the top 50 grossing tours from Billboard magazine and from, for that year. So it was a huge, huge, huge successful tour.
Wow.
And a lot of people said to me afterwards, like, wow, how do you manage to put that tour together? I said, like with a lot of trust and a lot of luck and somebody else's money. But it was
so the key was to find a financial backer, the SOB guy.
Yeah, the idea was there, but Larry Gold from SOB was the guy who said, I believe in
Larry
it.
Gold.
Yeah, Larry Gold. I believe in it, I'll put the money down to underpin the tour. And what a massive success.
And congratulations to him.
Yeah.
Congratulations to Larry.
Yeah.
Wow. I want to talk to you about the Scatterlights. I know you did work with Lester Sterling on some level. I think in 1996, the Toasters did a tour with him, and then you worked with him as an individual. What was that like, sir? Share some memory.
Well, one of the good things about the Skavubi tour was on our tour bus, they had to split the Scatterlights up because they were fighting, you see. And so
the ultimate warriors.
Well, you know how you Jamaican guys are. And so some of them had to go on this one bus, and some of them had to go on the other bus. So on the one bus with us was Lloyd Brevet, what a character, and we had Roland Alfonso, and we had Lester on our bus, and one of the other guys, I think maybe, who was trumpet at that point, maybe Nathan Breedlove, maybe, I want to say, was playing trumpet, and on the other bus was Nib and Tommy McCook on the other bus. And so we were on a bus with these guys traveling around, and we would we would take them into the diners and order their food, because these guys, didn't really know how to go to Denny's at night and order like late night breakfast. And Lester was a great guy. And night after night after night with him, we'd hang out and I'd get these fantastic stories. And it became clear to me, I was like, man, if out of all these guys, if anybody going back in time, you had to say, it's like, who is the key man for ska music? It has to be Lester Sterling. Not only, he got denied in the Scatterlights, I think, which is maybe a controversial point, but we can talk about that. But he was the musical director for Prince Buster.
Yes.
For that. He was the musical director for Byron Lee, playing trumpet at the time, which was his main instrument, which he learned in the army, he said. And so, we hit it off. And so after that, we took Lester on tour a little bit, and he played on the Dub 56 album, he guested on it, and the Hard Man for Dead album, he guessed on that. So Lester Sterling, what a gem. Fantastic gentleman.
Very full of humility too. Some of the names you mentioned were not very humble. Not very humble.
Very humble. I mean, never made a claim to anything. I mean, there's a lot of guys, as you know, as well as I do, in ska music and rave music, there's a lot of guys who want to say they originated it. And in fact, there's so many originators, it's not physically possible. Can't be all of them. Can't be all of them.
Right.
but I think the original originator, the real originators are people like Lester Sterling, who created the music and who was the band leader for so many influential bands back in the time. I never made a claim. Right. Very humble man. So I love Lester. I love Lester.
Right. And some of the other guys who were, I guess, more upscale in their thinking, more Elizabethan thinking, didn't want to identify with ska back in those days.
Yeah, maybe not.
They called themselves jazzmen until ska took off. Now they said, hold on, we're part of this too.
Well, that's what happens. And one of the controversial things about ska music is when you have a lot of people coming in, and I'm on controversial ground here. A lot of guys coming in making a claim to say, well, we're the guys originating this music. A lot of them didn't really show up in Jamaica until after the fact, because they'd been, like Tommy McCook, for example, great musician, but he was up in the Bahamas. Yeah, playing. And so he didn't really show up till later. So
right.
I think Tommy was a good organizer, but he wasn't really one of the guys who's in there on the ground. So I'd say a guy like Lester, who was maybe not the great organizational genius, but musically maybe the best guy. And I'll point to a fact. If you, let me make a point. If you look at this guy, Richard Branson, not Richard Branson, talking about the wrong guy, the space guy, the guy who from Island Records.
Chris Blackwell?
Yeah, Chris Blackwell. He his family is the one who made all that pickle. So, you know, so he said there was a seminal record that came out, the history of Jamaican music. It was a 4 CD set. And Chris Blackwell said the only person in the Scatolites he mentioned was Lester Sterling. And he mentioned him as the great Lester Sterling. So I think Lester Sterling is a guy who should really get his due.
Right, and hasn't. But from the readings I've done and my own understanding, when Tommy came back to Jamaica from the Bahamas, by then Cox and Dad wanted to start a band. And so he, invited several people, but I guess for whatever reason they didn't. So he asked Tommy twice. And on me and Tommy McCook, when Tommy was leaving, he played a song for him by Dan Drummond, School in the Duke. And I think this is the most accurate start of the Scatolites, and really when Ska came into full formation. And so Tommy said to him, McCook said, who is this guy here? He said, Dan Drummond. So where is he from? Jamaica.
What year would
let's
you
get
say
the
that?
band together.
What year would you say that was?
So Studio One opened 63. So I guess it's on or about that time. Right, because Coxon wanted a house band, a studio band. But Dan didn't have the ability to start a band because he had mental issues. And Tommy was highly organized, but he said it repeatedly, I'm a jazz man. But when he heard Dan Drummond and the Bones, he said, let's start the Scatolites. Let's start.
Yeah, well, I think Tommy had a lot of experience putting bands together
in the Bahamas.
And in the Bahamas, and it was mostly for like casino gigs.
Right.
So I think he was an organizational guy, but maybe not necessarily the best musician, and maybe not necessarily the most talented ska musician. And I would have said, Don Drummond would have been number one, but he was a little incapacitated. And of course he died in Bellevue Hospital in New York, unfortunately. But I think Lester Sterling was the guy who was, for me, was a linchpin of all of that, because he'd learned to play trumpet in the army, and so his main instrument was trumpet. And when he started playing with Byron Lee, he was on trumpet, and at that point he was already the musical director of the Byron Lee Band, which was the most successful commercial band that Jamaica ever had up until maybe Bob Marley or beyond. Byron Lee was a hugely successful band, and that was the interface. A lot of people don't want to say it because they look back at him and say he was cheesy, yeah, dude, but he was there, and what he was doing, he was providing interface between Jamaican music, whether it was calypso or whether it was mento or whether it was ska music, to the American tourists who were coming, which was the money, that the economy that was fueling these Jamaican bands. And I've had the same thing said to me by this guy. I don't know if you know this guy. What's his name now? I'm looking for his name. But these are guys who were like singing at the Glass Slip Club alongside Laura Aitken, and they're saying that a lot of the money coming in was from the American tourists, fueling it. But I think, going back to it, I just have to say that Lester is a very, very important guy. Very important guy.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And not, they call him Lester Sterling. Definitely not credited. But I think
the guy I was talking about.
I think posterity and history will remember Dan Drummond as we could go back and forth on this until eternity. But I think posterity and history will remember Dan Drummond as being miles ahead of all the musicians, not only in Jamaica, but perhaps in the entire Caribbean. As a matter of fact, there was a British singer, a British writer who wrote that Dan Drummond was among the 4 greatest trombone players. And that's his opinion, walking planet Earth.
There was no doubt that he was the Miles Davis of Jamaica.
And after he died, Scatterlight said, we can't hold it together without him. It's not much as he was not the leader.
and so they needed somebody who was maybe not the musical guru that they'd lost, but an organizational guru, like a man like Tommy McCook, come in and say, okay, well, here's how we're going to reform the band, and we're going to do this in a commercial sense. So I think Tommy McCook, great guy, great player, and he knew how to organize the band commercially. But I think the spirit of ska music after Don Drummond was Lester Sterling.
All right, I give you that.
Did you see what I'm saying?
Right.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, I think after Dan Drummond died, I think Tommy McCook, Jackie Mittoo step up from behind the shadows of all the horns players, and the rest is history. What he did at Studio One. As a matter of fact, some historians are referring to him now as Jamaica's single greatest musical arranger.
Yeah, that's pretty true.
Right.
But when I listen to a record, there's very few artists you can listen to when you listen to a recording, and you immediately know who that is. And when Lester plays,
yes, I agree.
You say, "Oh, that's Lester," because that's his sound. Lester had a sound.
Yes.
And first he had a sound of the trumpet, and then he had a sound. Whatever. So, but anyway, just to recircle back to what we're talking about the Skavuvi tour, what a fantastic opportunity that was to take all the generations out every night. And that was 50 dates. So that was a heavy duty tour over like 8 weeks, 8-week tour.
And did you guys go from coast to coast?
Yeah, everywhere, and including Canada. We had an interesting issue when we went across the border into Canada, and they were looking for the weed. I won't mention Lloyd Brevet, but he was the guy.
Original Rasta man.
Yeah, he was
from Warwick Hill.
What a character! But I think you're right to pinpoint that. The Skavuvi tour was really the springboard for ska music. All the ska music that had gone before, springboarding into what was going to happen into the 90s with a whole diaspora of different tastes, and what happened with ska music after that, where it went off into these strange places. But the Skavuvi tour, man, I do that again tomorrow if you ask me.
Oh, of course. Yes, sir.
That's about the most fun I've ever had in my life.
I want to segue into.
But I'm glad I wasn't a tour manager.
I can imagine, boy. So the Toasters were part of the Scare Against Racism tour. How important is it to help educate and enlighten people as you travel across the country?
Well, I mean, growing up in England, racism wasn't a big concern until I moved to the USA. And unfortunately here, I have to say, I mean, I've lived in this country now for, 40 years, and I still can't get over the racist part. And I said, like, man, if you want to consider yourself the most advanced societal evolution, you have to come to terms with this. and you got to come to terms with the history and admit that, yeah, we did that, and fess up and say, yeah, we're going to try and make it better. But somehow here that can't happen. And I remember, we participated in the Sky Against Racism tour in 1998 with Less Than Jake and Mike Park and these other bands. I thought, wow, so how is it really necessary at this point in time to have to organize a tour like this to advertise to people this is not cool, and that was 30 years ago, and it's still going on. I mean, I remember playing shows in Florida, for example, in the early 90s, and in Gainesville, Florida, which is a big university down. And at that time, we had our roadies and security were some guys from the sharp skinheads against racial prejudice guys. And one of them comes up, we're getting ready to go on. He says, boss, there's some trouble outside. Can you come out? I said, all right, let's go see. And so I walk outside, and here's our security crew. And then here's a bunch of guys with these, Nazi armbands, skinhead guys saying, they said, well, we want to come in to see the show. I said, well, how's that going to be possible if you're wearing this stuff? They said, oh, we'll take this off. And he said, well, we're really big fans. We like the music.
Wow.
We just want to come see the show. And I turned around to at that point, Cashew Miles is in the band and said, well, you want to pay money to see the black man sing? I mean, how does this work with your resource? I said, yeah, we're big friends, big fans. And the other guy said, yeah, we're not racist, we're just bigots. And at that point I realized, dude,
that's a synonym.
Yeah, you guys are just stupid. You've been fed this disinformation by somebody. Whoever told you this stuff, it's like, we need to get to them. But it's like, man, these people want to be cool, but they can't be because they have indoctrination from their parents or from their school or from their
Society.
Politicians or whatever. It's like, in fact, and that stuff's still there, Junior.
So did you let those guys in? I'm curious to hear the end.
Yeah.
Did you let them in?
We let them in,
Mm-hmm.
and the bouncers at the show, these big local guys, big brothers, I said, dude, if these guys misbehave, please school them in the errors of their ways. And they were like, well, we're ready. So they came in, they liked the show, went back outside, put their Nazi back on, and off they went. So, but there's hope. See, on some level, these people get it.
Yeah, I heard that Bob Marley had a similar example in England where some really racist skinhead came to a concert and wanted to see him. And so they decided to compromise and said, okay, they want to see Scan Love Scan so bad. Bob Marley said, oh, well, this is a moment for you to make a change in your life. You have the enormous opportunity. They compromised and went in, no problem, and perhaps got converted.
Well, we can live in hope, and then maybe that was the moment where these people see the error of their ways, but you have to try.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is you can't exclude these people. You have to try to safely find a way to bring them in and present your point of view.
Yeah.
But then if they don't like it, push them back out. But you have to try to help these people because the way I see it, these people it's a form of mental illness.
Right. I've arrived at that conclusion too.
Mm.
I've arrived at that conclusion. Let me remind the viewers and the listeners that I'm in conversation with veteran singer, guitarist, frontman for the Toasters and record label guru, Bucket. Everybody calls him Bucket, but his parents christened him Rob Hingley. Rob, there's a song by the Toasters that I love with great passion, really and truly, and it's called The Stage. Oh man! And with a DJ came in after a couple lines.
Now you're hitting me with a curveball. Well, first I have to remember what that is, and now I do. It's like, what happened there?
I think the guy is related to Jack Ruby.
What it is?
Am I right or not?
No, not exactly. I mean, Jack Ruby performed on that, but
Jack Ruby.
That recording was a project done for Island Records.
Yes, sir.
And the producer was a Gaz Mail from the Trojans.
Mhm.
You know this guy?
Right.
And so he got a project from Island Records to make a compilation.
Mhm.
And he approached us and said, "Do you want to be a part of this?" And we said, "Sure." And he said, "Well, the catch is that you're not going to be able to play your normal song.
Mm.
I'm going to give you a song that's out of your normal style. And you're going to have to interpret it and play it your way." And say, "Okay." And so that's what happened. So we went in the studio with him, and we had that tennis tune now at the stage, and so we had to do it in our style, and so that's how that whole thing went on. And there were whole other bands participating on that. Fishbone was on that. Laura Lincoln was on that. So it was like a little wacky compilation. So that's one of the more outside things we've done. So that's a very eclectic thing to find there. That's a little nugget to find there.
Well, and so the question that I asked after I heard that song, because Ronnie Davis has a version with the tenors, and then someone told me that there's also an interpretation by the Toasters, and a DJ killed it. So my question then, over the years, has been, why didn't the Toasters make other records like that? Am I the only one who loved that song with great passion?
Well, it was a challenge. And they said, can you play this song in this style? It's like not, and so we said, okay, we'll give it a shot, and that's what happened. And I think it came out as a 7-inch record, and the flip side is Fishbone. So if you can find that, you're a lucky man.
Probably has big value.
look for that on discography, but yeah, it was like a throwdown. It's like, can you guys play outside of your style and play this song? Was it the tenor was the Paragons version of it? But anyway, we hit it, and it was the whole world.
Oh man!
Yeah, I remember it. It was great.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
what a great session.
Yeah, I played on my radio. I've been playing that one now, gosh, from ever since I came across it, which probably over 30 odd years.
Yeah.
6 months won't go by. So who was the DJ? Jack Ruby's son, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You ever went on tour with him? Or
yeah, we went on tour with him a lot, and very mercurial character, a lot of energy on the stage. But he had a lot of stories about his father, and how his father was he paid for all the school books,
his father,
in the local school and everything. And when the school needed a new roof, his father would pay all this kind of stuff. So
that's good to know.
Yeah, his father was like not only a big producer, but very Robin Hood type figure. You know, he'd rob from the rich and give to the poor. So,
yes, I heard. That's why he left Kingston and went back to St. Anne's, which was good for him and good for Burning Spear. And a wonderful production came out, St. Anne's.
Well, I think they're from Ocho Rios, the family. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right, which is again St. Anne's. Isn't it Ocho Rios in St. Anne's?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm close.
But I'm still in touch with Jack Ruby. He's
where is he? So how come he's not making records?
He has too many children, too many baby mothers, too much.
Which is why he should be out there making money.
Yeah, he should be out there. So he's doing some stuff here and there. Whenever we go up, go down to South Florida, normally he shows up to a show. So I have to book something down there so he can come back.
Yeah.
What a great character he was. And the first time we met him was funny because we'd gone down to, here's the story. We'd gone down to play some big college show, some weekend in the Bahamas, and it got rained out. So it's a big, spring weekend so we go down, it's rained out. So we're hanging down and we're all being paid, everything, sitting down there, we can't play. And some guy says, Bucket, you gotta go down to the lobby and check out this guy who's running the karaoke in the piano bar. You got to go check this guy out. So we go down there to the piano bar, and here's Jack Ruby running the place. And so we're like, what's going on? He said, yeah, we're gonna run this and whatever. And he goes, yeah, come back to my room. I've got 200 cases of beer up there. I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, well, since the event got rained out, they had it all there. So I would just put it on the cart and I put all this beer back in my room. So we went up to his hotel room and he has wall-to-wall cases of beer there. So we're drinking beer and like throwing beer out the window and all this kind of stuff. And then we said, well, what you do? And he said, oh, come on down to, so we go back down to the karaoke bar and then we hired him for the toaster. So that was how that happened. Wow. Serendipity.
Wow. Yeah, one of my favorites. One of my favorites.
And then it turned out he's Jack Ruby's son, you know.
Yes, sir. One of my favorite.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I want to go back to Moon release. Many important compilations throughout its existence. Talk about the Southern California Skakwick and Scamageddon series. I think those were two separate series, right?
Yeah, Scamageddon was slightly later, but the Skakwick compilation was released in late 80s, and that was a result of us coming to play shows in California from 88 onwards and seeing what a great selection of bands there were at that time there. And unbeknownst to most of us on East Coast at that time,
right?
Because of course, it wasn't a national distribution system. So we were coming in to play shows organized by Golden Voice at venues like the Country Club in Reseda, with bands like Let's Go Bowling, with bands like Dancehall Crashers, and bands like Hepcat. And I'm thinking, goodness me, look at what's going on here. What a great bunch of talent. But all through California, go up and down in San Diego, bands down there. So we put out that compilation, and it was a huge hit, and introduced a lot of those bands, I think, for the first time to international audiences.
Brilliant idea. Wonderful. Right. So, anything else you wanted to add about that? Because there were two sets of compilations, right?
Well, we'd had one compilation released on vinyl in as early as 1988, with some unknown band, some no name. What is his name? No doubt. These guys. And so we discovered that band, and we put out the first two singles for them. One on the Scarface comp, and the next in the 1990 Skakwick. So at that point, it was a huge scene happening in California.
Yes,
and it was separate, I think, to what was going on in the rest of the country.
Right.
They had their own thing bubbling up.
Yes, sir. Which Jamaican legend did Moonscare label release albums for?
Laura Aitken, the Scatlites, Tommy McCook, and then whom else? Those three for now. There's probably a couple more, I have to think.
And so when and why did Moonscare close shop?
We closed in 2000. And what happened,
I guess the larger question is why.
There's a number of questions. Throughout the 90s, it got so big that we had to...
The scene or the label?
Well, both. The label got too big, the scene had got too big, but most importantly, the cost of doing business had got too big. So we had to upgrade to a bigger store, we had to upgrade to a bigger distribution cost. And then what happened, I think there was a tipping point, I would say 1998, where there were too many people trying to make money off the scene than was possible. And then what happened, a lot of independent distributors started to fail. And one of the causes of this was because of buyouts in the scene. The other was because of Napster in 1998, which kind of destroyed the file sharing program. Familiar with that? Which kind of destroyed the sharing. And so after 1998, we won't make any money. And we were faced with a decision of whether we're going to try to continue the label into the face of mounting losses or stop while we're ahead and call it a day and not have to continue and do something that eventually we'd be unhappy with. So unfortunately, we had to close because the money dried up.
So in hindsight, is there anything you would have done differently looking back now? Guess what, 30 some odd years? No,
For the label?
No, yeah. So we're talking about 2000 close, right?
Yeah,
So
I would have.
I
would maybe
2 decades.
Maybe not expanded into the bigger store. I would maybe kept it a smaller distro. Number two, maybe I should have, signed bands up to multi-record deals instead of being a little bit more of an artist co-op than we were. That was maybe a mistake. But I think nobody could foretell what was going to happen. And I think at the time where, ska music got so popular that the big money people came in and really wrecked it, that was the point that I should have got out. So I should have got out of ska music in 1995, but I waited too long. But in any case, what happened, Moonworkers was a great time. It's a shame I had to close it, but I do it all over again. What a great experience.
Of course. But then in 2002, I think you started a new label, right? Is that Megla? How you pronounce it?
Megalith, yeah.
Megalith.
And that's still plugging along, but there's no point these days having a record label.
Why is that so?
Yeah.
Because of download.
That and
streaming.
Yeah, all this. And so Megalith is mostly an imprint to keep Toasters Records in print and put a record out for bands I like here or there. But the record label, unfortunately, is in a very tricky situation at the moment. But we have to get rid of the vampires like Spotify, or at least get these people who are making millions, cut the artists in. And the way I suggest they do that is just to be fair and say, well, look, we can say that here's the amount of money coming in. You might be losing money on distributing the music, but the advertising is where the money is. So if they could just do a joint venture between Spotify and artists on that, we'd all be happy. So that's what I would suggest.
Right. And speaking of advertising, the Toasters had some huge success with music placements, including Coca-Cola, Two-Tone Army.
not just that. Yeah.
Right. I was rattling them up, but if you could complete the thought for me.
The Coca-Cola thing was interesting. They called up at some point and said, "Can you write us we're looking for a commercial, and it has to be 1 minute long, and it has to say always Coca-Cola 12 times." And it has to have a 15-second blank spot for some guy to say, Coca-Cola, buy it, drink it, it's going to kill you, whatever they say in his advert. And I said, yeah, okay, we can do that. So we went in the studio in New York with this guy who'd actually been some big-time producer for Michael Jackson or James Brown or somebody. His affiliation was. So you go in this big studio, and we make this 1 minute spot, and we have to have a riff, and then a break, and then a chorus, and then a 15-minute blank spot. And so it ended up being always Coca-Cola, and then a hook, always Coca-Cola, always go, and then the guy saying, yeah, buy Coca-Cola, it's going to kill you, don't worry, it makes your teeth fall out, always go. So so that was that. And they paid us $25,000 for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mhm. How about your the Two-Tone Army? That was one of the songs
So
that
of course I did it.
yes, well, of course. And the Two-Tone Army, that was a song that became I think the theme for Nickelodeon. Am I right, sir? That kids program.
Yeah, well, that's another thing that came in. I mean, that show, the creator Matt Edward had originally wanted Bad Manners to write the theme tune, but they were unavailable. So the guys from Nickelodeon, I guess, Bad Manners had backed out, and Nickelodeon were in a spot, and they called up and said, "Is this something you can do?" And I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's like a cartoon show for kids." I said, "Well, of course I'm going to do that. Show me what it is." And so we went up there, and they said, "Well, we need a theme tune for the show, which is called Kablam. And if you wouldn't mind, could you write us a few pieces of instrumental bumper music to go along with the recording of the show?" And I said, "Well, how many is that?" And they said, "Well, could you write us 180 pieces of music?" and I'm like, "Well, I'm kind of on tour at the moment, and I've got another tour coming up, and we're doing the Toasters record, which was a hard band for dead. Would you mind if I just fits it in between as I do this stuff?" And they said, "No, go ahead." And so what happened, as we were working up all the ideas for the hard band for dead record, I would take versions of that stuff
Mm-hmm.
and record them and
Clever.
send them off to Kablam MTV and say, "Well, would you be interested in something like this?" And they said, "Yeah, that sounds great." I said, "Well, I'll do a cowboy version of that, and we'll do a rock and roll version of the same tune." So Two-Tone Army tune became the theme tune for that, and a lot of the bumper music. So that happened at the same time as we were doing it. So it all just came out by itself very naturally.
How did that help the popularity of the Toasters?
Well,
those two distinctive, different projects.
in a massive way. And I didn't find out until afterwards, because what happened with that is that we did it, and it was this project. They said, "Oh, here's, signed, sealed, delivered. Here's your 180 piece of music. Off you go, the bumper music." And it wasn't until afterwards, and maybe even years afterwards, that I understood how important that was, because we would go around the world and people would say, "Well, I came to see you tonight because I never knew the band and I don't know what the music was, but I watched this television show and you guys played it. So I came out to see you because of that." And so that ended up being a huge portal for kids to get into the music because of that. So yeah, what a great chance that was to push ska music out without anybody knowing about it.
Definitely. I'd be remiss not to mention Mexico before we close. The Toasters are larger than life in Mexico. What has the experience been like playing in Mexico numerous times over the decades? Tell us about your experiences.
Well, Mexico's great. And number one, I'd say that, anybody's scared about going to Mexico, don't be scared, because they're some of the best people in the world there. Very happy people who fucking love ska music. In fact, love any kind of underground music, whatever. Huge rockabilly scene. And the ska music scene there is huge. And I have to take my hat off and give respect to two guys. One who's Jesus Arriaga from Chewy from Inspector, that big man from Monterrey, and Jose Olan from How to Control Army. These guys organize these massive shows. You're talking 12, 15, 20,000 people at these festivals. And Mexico, it's great. I would go down there. I would go down there any chance I got. Unfortunately, we've been a little bit prohibited from COVID, but I'm hoping that this next year we can take it up. but the Mexicans love it. One of the biggest ska massives out there at the moment.
The lawyer, I've been down here numerous times, so I can speak. Yes, indeed. Well, we have some questions from our fans, so I'm going to invite producer and good friend Eric Kohler to join the conversation.
Great to see you.
He has some questions for you, Bucket.
We know Eric from a little while back. We've been in contact from the 90s.
That's right. And I guess for the sake of the viewers and listeners, Rob, we talked about it earlier, but I do want to thank you on camera here officially. When Reggae Nucleus magazine was around, Moon Records played such a big role in sending us product that we would review and provide some content.
Well, like I said to Junor earlier, you were on our A list of promotional outlets for underground sources, and that was always the people we looked at. Was not mainstream people who would maybe hit or miss. We looked for people like you who were like a nucleus, like a go-to guy in that scene there would say, well, if we send this music to this guy, he's not going to waste it. He's not going to take these releases down to the local music store and sell them. He's going to keep it, and he's going to review it in his magazine. He's going to play at his DJ show where he goes to the DJ shows, and so you were the prototype of the guy we were looking at to pitch this music to. And look, here you are 40 years later. So
yes,
as it turns out, we were right.
You absolutely were.
We picked the right guy.
Yeah, no, the so many of the albums I played also on my Feel Into Vibes college radio show and
exactly. See,
it was amazing for music discovery.
You were multitasking. You didn't just have the college radio show. You had the fanzine, you had the magazine. You go out DJing at clubs. You were precisely the guy we wanted to float this to, because that's where we saw the water table of this music being. It's not to shoot it up to people, not try to shoot too high, not to shoot too low, but get it to people who are going to infiltrate it out to the people they knew that believed in it and build it up that way, like in a grassroots way. And that was the huge success of Moon Records, is we understood that, and we didn't try to go too big. We went to people who would take the music out and share it and create a platform and reach out to the more interested people. And look what happened 40 years on.
It's so true. And along those lines, a few questions from fans. So 2 of them about Moon, 2 about Toaster. So one of them, not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot. If you had to name check a few bands that were really synonymous with Moon and that really, helped the label, and at the same time the label helped them, just for the sake of our viewers and listeners, who would be some of those bands?
Well, you'd have to give me a time period, because it was a little bit different from what time period of Moon you're talking about. I mean, there was the mid-80s time where it was like primarily New York City based acts.
Sure.
But from 1988 on, where we released bands, and I would say the fulcrum there would be Let's Go Bowling.
Fresno, California based,
which was the band, the collaboration, which really, made us a national label and turned a lot of bands onto us, and working with them showed a lot of the West Coast bands that we were the label that could do stuff for them. But I think Let's Go Bowling, that was a fantastic band, and why they didn't go further than they did, I don't really understand. Well, I actually do understand a bit of it. I think they were unfortunate to lose their lead singer to a car accident, and that really put them back. But what a fantastic band that was. And I thought they were leading the charge for West Coast bands at that time in '88 when we played with them first. And so another band I would say would have been the Scofflaws on the East Coast. And then whom else? The other bands would have come later, and I would have said bands like Bedford Scaffoldies and the Pie Tasters and Mustard Plug. But I think from the early days, I think Let's Go Bowling and the Scofflaws would have been the 2 bands that I would push out.
Right. Next question comes from somebody who you know, although I don't think, according to him, you've never met in person, but Lewis King Steady Beat Korea from Steady Beat Recordings out here.
I've never met him, but
Yeah,
but we've exchanged a lot of emails, and what a great label that has been over the years.
yes,
And I have maximum respect for that. Maximum respect for Louis. Yeah.
yeah, and I think you worked together a little bit on the second Skywquake compilation.
Yeah.
But his question was, and you touched on this earlier, but and obviously this hits home for him because he is a label owner, but he wanted to know exactly how you felt the moment you decided or had to make the unfortunate decision to close down Moon. But like how to describe how you were feeling, because it's, to him it would have been
It's
like,
difficult. I mean, decision obviously it was a very emotional decision, but the decision ultimately couldn't be based on emotion or what I wanted to do. It was based on finances and what happened at that time in between 1996 really, which is when it started, and 2000 was the collapse of the independent
right,
distribution system in the USA. And part of that was because a lot of smaller companies like Greenworld or Rots Records or whomever had gone out of business and taken a lot of the money, which was not huge amounts of money, but for an indie label was a large
Sure.
amount of money.
yeah,
So we had a lot of independent record failures, and a lot of that had been caused by the fact that bigger players like Sony and like EMI had been coming into the market and buying up distributors. So the final nail in the coffin for us was when Caroline, who was at that point was our primary distributor and one of the few left after the failures.
yeah,
EMI bought them and said, well, what's going to happen is we're going to draw a line, and anybody who's earning less than this amount of money every year, which was like $2 million it was, you're going to have to can them.
Mm.
And so what happened, without any warning, we were told it's like, oh, we're not distributing you anymore, and we're sending you all your product back, including $500,000 worth of product that we just shipped you last week. And so we got cut off. What happened was we had a tractor trailer full of product showed up outside our store one day and dumped it off in the street. And I was like, what are we going to do now? We had no alternative but to say we had to stop.
sure,
And at the same time as they were dumping our product, they'd ordered $250,000 worth of other titles. So it was crazy.
wow.
So at that point, I said that we can't deal with this.
No, right.
And so the choice there was to, well, what do we do now? Like struggle forward for the next 3, 5, 7 years with no cash flow under a dubious outlook because of all the file sharing and downloads going on. So I'd say,
Yeah, it was such an interesting, challenging time. Yeah.
yeah. So I'd say, I have to be a grown up and say it's not possible to go forward. So we had to stop while we're ahead and say we're going to call it a day right here.
Cut your losses. Yeah.
Pay off as many people as possible, which didn't include Caroline, which didn't include the landlord. And I told the bands, it's like, dude, if you got a van, come here now and fill it up with stuff and take it away. And that's how Moon Records.
Yeah.
Bands were showing up with trucks, and we were like showing so much stuff. It's like that last helicopter off the embassy in Vietnam. It's like that. But it's like market forces, like, man, how and it's incredible how after having been in business 25 years for some distributors, the minute they don't think you can pay them a penny, they won't help.
Yeah,
so
right.
I think I came away with that is there's no such thing as a friend in the music business.
It's what have you done for me lately?
But
Well,
wasn't but Carolina was based in England, right?
yeah, originally.
Oh, okay.
And they were
Offshot of Virgin.
yeah, and they were
Yeah.
the biggest indie distributor in the USA
Oh, okay,
at
that I
that
didn't
time
know.
in 2000, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Because IRD Relativity had been bought by Sony,
Mhm.
and Sony
Right.
wanted to choose us because they thought Sky Music wasn't worth anything.
Mhm.
All these people got it wrong by 10 years.
Right.
They should have stuck it out 10 years.
Right.
And so it was a total market force. So I had to make a economic decision and say, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to sit here and maybe lose my shirt and everybody else's shirt and not be assured at the end of it we'll have a label, which we wouldn't have done. As it turned out, it was the right decision to stop, because what happened with the file sharing and Napster and all this stuff and Spotify, everything. But it was, we were in too exposed a position
Yeah.
financially.
Yeah. Understandable.
Mhm.
Two more questions. One comes from Ritmo Del Alma Radio. The question was, if you can take your memory bank back to 1993, do you have any memories of the show in Caracas, Venezuela? I don't know if in 93, if that might have been your first time down there or not, but any memories of maybe playing Venezuela?
Well, no, not only do I have a good memory, I also have a recording of that show.
Okay, well, there we go. Very relevant question.
We have a limited edition live in Caracas
Oh, okay. All right.
CD, which I think there's 500 copies of it floating around.
Wow.
And we went down there with Desorden Publico as our hosts.
Yes. Okay.
And what a fantastic time. We came in, it was the same week they had the coup. So we were riding around in our tour van, and there was all Jeeps, army guys with guns, and say, well, this is our escort of these, the band. So who's these guys? What a fantastic show. But I would also give a shout out this time to Radio Pirata, which is the guys from Desorden Publico, Horace and Caplis.
Okay.
So please check into them and check them out. They're still going. So yeah, what a
That's
great
amazing.
time. Yeah.
I'll have to search for that recording. And the last question is, so you go in strong as clearly the constant member of and frontman and leader of the Toasters, but what continues to motivate you to stay on the road and to record and to keep so active?
Well, number one, I don't want to get a job. Okay? So if I'm going to earn money, I may as well be doing this. I'm going to kind of stay on the outside of society because I don't like society that much, and I'm not sure how much it likes me. But I mean, at this point, who's going to hire me? I'm 65 years old. Who's going to hire this guy? I go to a job interview. They say, "What can you do?" I say, "Well, I can do everything. I'm a a jack of all trades and a master of none. Who's going to hire me?" So, number one, I have to keep doing this. But I mean, I still love doing this. I can't wait for this COVID nonsense to be over, for our politicians to get their shit together finally, and the public to, get together and reach a public health massive, which we haven't done yet. People have to educate themselves a little bit and get together and say, well, the only people going to fix this is going to be ourselves. Get together, get your vaccination, and let's get this going and get society back to normal. If we leave it up to the politician, we're still going to be sticking our finger up our ass in 3 years' time, looking to see what happened. So, but having said that, we're going to have some tour dates.
Yeah, very exciting.
In December. I'm looking forward to seeing you there and have
Absolutely.
Junor buy me a drink for all this.
Yes. Oh, yes, sir. Red Striper.
The dry throat now. I'm going to need a couple of drinks to Junor.
We will come out. We'll come out in hand for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. So, any closing thoughts, Bucket?
Well, thanks. First of all, thanks a lot for interviewing me. I think it's very interesting to go back to the choice questions you had. It was very refreshing because not a lot of people want to focus on what was going on in that, for me, a key period of ska music, which was 1988 to 1993, in which the West Coast and the LA ska scene in particular, involving bands like Hepcat, but also bands like Jump with Joey, who a lot of people don't talk about, but who was a precursor there.
Yes.
A lot of bands off the California Scarecrows CD that I would point people towards, like great selection of bands. And what was the name of the band from they get out of San Diego?
I didn't know. You're not talking about Big Mountain. Only know Big Mountain.
Unsteady.
Not
Donkey Show. Sure.
Yeah, no, it was after Donkey Show. Yeah. Well, Donkey Show, of course, was Dave Hilliard, who's kind of been like a lodestone.
Hubcats, the Slackers.
So yeah, Dave Hilliard. So I'll give a big shout out to Dave Hilliard.
Yes.
So I think that period of ska music, 1988 to 1993, not just in the West Coast, but on the East Coast, but what's happening in America generally, in the heartland. And I'm also including towns like Chicago and St. Louis and
Midwest,
Florida.
for sure. Yeah.
So that was a key time. I think what happened before that in the early 80s was things going on in New York with the Toasters and the West Coast with a band. Can you see my t-shirt?
Yes, the Untouchables.
Yeah, I wanted to.
Oh, there we go.
LA's.
Yeah, I wanted to rep these guys who I first saw in England before I even moved to America. So I saw them when they were signed to Stiff Records. So big shout out to the Untouchables, who were maybe not a ska band, but they were seminal to providing that.
And their first album came out the same year that yours and the Fishbones.
Yeah. And we just played with them like last year too. So good to see them.
Yeah, we interviewed and talked to Jerry last year. So.
Yeah. So all us old guys were doing that, but I think what came after in that second wave of American ska between 1988 and 1993 was really seminal. And a big band, I would say, Gangster Fun out of Detroit, Michigan. There's a big band right now. So a lot of stuff going on. So thanks a lot for pointing that out, Junior.
Yes, Bucket. Yes, man.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, sir. I want you to save your voice, sir. Right?
I've enjoyed listening off into the waves, but Bucket, thank you for everything, for your contribution. You are without a doubt such a key figure, one of the most important in the ska. Don't always like to use the word ska revival, but that's and keeping the ska music alive. So kudos to you.
I reject the term revival because it never went away.
That's true. Absolutely.
Love that.
In order to revive something, it has to be dead. And ska was never dead.
I've never heard it put so bluntly. I love that.
No, very true. Very true.
Well, here's what I say. It's like ska music is going along. Now and again, it puts its head up so people can see it, gets it, and then comes back down. And just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So when people say revival, say, dude, that's a disrespect, because for something to be revived, it has to be dead first. And ska has never been dead and will never be dead.
Yes, sir.
It's a hard band for dead.
That's right.
On that note, that's a perfect way to end this. Rob, thank you so much, Junior. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
Bucket, want to thank you again, man. And I want to remind our viewers and listeners that a guest has been veteran singer, guitarist, frontman for the Toasters, and record label guru. We know him as Bucket worldwide, but his parents register him as Rob Hingley. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Taking time out of your busy schedule, go and quench your thirst. And I want to remind our viewers and listeners again to please follow us at History of L.A. Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and join our Facebook group. This series is produced by my good friend right here to my left, Eric Kohler, for Rockery Radio. Again, please follow us at Rockery_radio on Instagram for fresh rock, rhythm, and soul and Jamaican music inspired by daily Spotify playlist. The man is very busy, extremely busy. All done by Eric Kohler and his partner, Sean. Again, I'm Junor Francis. Eric and Bucket, thanks.
Thank you, Junior. Thank you, Bucket. Have a great night. Take care.